Absolutely. Cannot believe that I'm about to say this. But
If you're watching this, then you know by now a huge problem is heading our way. An emergency meeting is being called at our usual place immediately. Free bagels.
let's be honest. Did anyone really expect anything from this movie? I mean, if the trailers and commercials didn't deter you from seeing the film, then you should have known what you were getting into. First, let's summarize. The movie is about the moon falling into Earth, and somehow our best option is Halle Berry, Patrick Wilson, and Samuel Tarly. Jokes aside, we got to give actually some props to John Bradley, because he's been doing what he can in Hollywood. Even if those roles are in Moonfall and Marry Me, he's doing the best he can. But back to the movie. I'm going to try and not spoil anything as normal, but I apologize in advance, blah, 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 if I say something and end up doing that. First, you can tell that this is an Emmerich movie. This feels pretty on par with some of his last films. Let me say this. I think the potential for this movie was so much more than others. I mean, it's a terrible idea, but it somehow wasn't. It was somehow there. I mean, it's so hard to put into words. There was just so much that could have happened. There was so much potential for such a dumb plot. But the huge critique of this film is that there is actually just too much going on. Well, there's really only two plot lines. They felt disjointed and both individually not entirely fleshed out. And I think this hurts like your resonation and personability with characters. Also, I think this movie, was reasonably long. And off the top of my head, maybe 2.5 hours. Really, it felt like that. But I think it could have been 3, and honestly, have been a much more solid film. It just seems like they condensed things to maybe a little over 2 hours, and it needed to be longer. But to be fair, I think they were probably going to be surprised if many people came and saw it. And actually, at this time, I want to point out one of my biggest complaints, and it's very nuanced, and I apologize. But the dialogue in this movie is too fast. Not like the characters are in a hurry fast, but like they actually sped up the dialogue in the scenes. I mean, the delivery was almost inhuman, which was pissing me off in theaters. I mean, I distinctly remember scenes with Halle Berry, and she was just. It was unnatural. It truly was unnatural. I think I will buy this movie on, Blu-ray and watch it back and just see if I was maybe just on something that day, because I've never experienced something like that in a movie. Another note here, something that bothered me was kind of just the ad placement. It's definitely more and more prevalent in Hollywood and films, and I can understand it. I mean, these movies cost a lot of money to make, and if a company's going to help you, take out an ad, save you some money, I'm all for it. I truly understand that. But the ads in this movie were pretty, they weren't just visual. I mean, they were saying things, and that was kind of, it was probably hard to get funding for this film. Let's just put it there. But there are some good things about this movie. For example, the CGI and special effects are top notch. I mean, truly, this was a breath of fresh air. I mean, every scene that involved the moon was absolutely breathtaking. But this had to be where most of the budget was spent. And while we're on the topic of budget, I looked it up, and this is hopefully old data, hopefully for them. But it estimated $150 million to produce, and it made close to $40 million in the box office. So, I mean, that's a big hit. That's a big hit. And while I did complain earlier about the story, I do have to admit it really kept delivering curveball Dr. Curveball, I mentioned, it was felt some of the plot lines disjointed and that maybe they were doing too much and not enough time. But I mean, you could never expect what was happening next. I mean, truly, it was, it was going everywhere in any direction. It felt like they were making up lines as they went and just like, hey, great idea, we're sticking to it. And even with that, I think we got to hand it to the cast. I think that they did the best they could with what they were given. Now, besides my, nuanced nitpicking about that dialogue being too sped up, the three main characters did a great job. Supporting characters weren't bad, didn't really, grind my gears too much. They played their role and really didn't take away from the film. Not really either added, but it is what it is. So overall, my honest opinion, as a self-proclaimed movie critic, this movie is not deserving of anything better than a 4. It's honestly pretty bad. If you were not expecting this movie and just showed up at the theater and were like, oh, Moonfall, let's go see it, I think you would have left. However, personally, I'm a huge fan of terrible science fiction. Lake Placid, fantastic. Greenland and films such as that, love them. It's so enjoyable to watch really terrible science fiction movies. And because of that, I think this is the best one of all time. Not even kidding. This movie delivered one of the dumbest and wildest plots that I've ever seen in a movie with next level graphics. I mean, if we're on a scale of 1 to 10 for worst science fiction films, this movie's a 10 out of 10. And so with that, that'll conclude our review of Moonfall. Stay tuned for next time when I give you another movie with John Bradley. Yeah. We'll see what else he's been up to in Hollywood recently.